Joel Brown, President, McKenzie County Job Development Authority.
Thank you very much for joining the program here today. Of course, in a day job, you're also with mineraltracker.com, and I do want to ask you how that's going in a moment or two, but we should probably find out the news at hand, if you will, and there's always breaking news going on in Watford City these days, so let's just start off with a general update from the president's standpoint of the McKenzie County's Job Development Authority. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. The Job Development Authority is the branch of McKenzie County that is really focused on economic development. And so we're an appointed board, largely of business leaders, community leaders in Watford City and surrounding communities in McKenzie County. We've got representation from Arnegard and Alexander and throughout the entire county. But our focus and what we're really concerned about is how do we take McKenzie County to the next level economically? How do we keep this train moving? We've got a tremendous opportunity right now with what's going on in the Bakken, with the opportunity that we have for increased workforce, for increased industry, for increased GDP. It's pretty incredible what we have here in McKenzie County. What was 20 years ago was a much smaller population base than we have right now. And so, yeah, the big news recently from the JDA standpoint is we just launched a housing development subsidy program that's going to be aimed at addressing what we see as the number one issue hindering economic development in McKenzie County today, and that's lack of affordable single-family housing.
Can I ask you a question, just a sidebar on that?
Absolutely.
And I don't know if you're qualified to answer this or not, at how deep this goes, but when I've heard the term affordable single housing now for a number of years, and have we got a definition of that? Because obviously that's going to be different in Dickinson and Williston than Watford City. Do you know what I mean? Have you guys landed on what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. At least what we've seen is kind of the benchmark is we've got a tremendous amount of people that are waiting in line right now, approved for FHA loan. FHA loans are the loan program through it's a federal loan program aimed at helping first-time home buyers typically purchase their first home when they may not have the credit history necessary to do it, and they may not have the down payment of up to 20% of the total home sale value. So what we've set as the benchmark for an affordable single family house is something that's going to meet that FHA limit, which right now is approximately $315,000 in McKenzie County. And the fact is that those houses just don't exist in this market right now. We've got a lot of people that could take advantage of this great federal program here to move out of an apartment into their first house and plant some more permanent roots here in McKenzie County. But the market for houses that meet that FHA loan limit, they just don't exist.
I was talking with Pat Young from Patlock yesterday. He's I think he said is 101 Main Street, I think he said was his address. He went ahead and just threw out his address, and he said, anybody looking for a job, we're hiring, type of a thing. I don't know. Do you know Pat at all?
No, I don't know Pat Young.
Okay,
No,
well, go down and say hello to him. Tell him Jason Spees from the Crude Life and the Multimedia Cafe said hello. He's right on Main Street, Patlock Safety Services. Great story. Roustabout that figured out a new way to make the oil industry safer and save some money. And like the oil industry does, they seem to enable opportunity instead of entitlement. And so he went ahead. He's got a business in Main Street down in Watford, and it sounds like he just said, some of the quality of life changes that he's seen over the past year. And that was my transition question. But I wanted to, of course, I guess, give some context with just yesterday I talked to a gentleman who lives in Watford and has a business there. And, he mentioned a few of the businesses that have popped up in the past year. From your perspective and your quality of life, has it increased in the past year?
Oh, absolutely. I'm from Watford City originally. I grew up here. My wife and I moved down to Denver right after we got married when we were newly married, and we always wanted to come back, and it was incredible when I came back after having been away at college for a period of time, living in Denver for a period of time. I came back, and Watford City was a completely different town than it was when I was growing up here. And the great thing is I enjoy it so much more. We have so much, I mean, aside from just, economic opportunities that we have here, the quality of life opportunities that we have here are just tremendous. I mean, I would challenge you to find another community the size of Watford that has a Rough Rider Center-esque event center, or a high school like we do. If you look at the restaurants that we have, a city the size of Watford City has the second biggest microbrewery in North Dakota. I mean, so there's a lot to do here. It's a really young, fun community. It's our number one demographic is young families, which my family gets included in that demographic too. And so it's a really energetic, fun place to be with a lot of opportunity and fun things to do, a lot of people to connect with.
How about on the education standpoint? You mentioned you lived there, so seems appropriate enough. You've got mineraltracker.com as a business, so you're a small business owner, and you've also got active roles as president, Job Development Authority, McKenzie County. So I want to ask you about the schools. Lieutenant Governor, former mayor of Watford City, Brent Sanford. I still chuckle at the interviews him and I did through the years in the early Bakken days where the kids were using outhouses and the most important part of that story is everyone was okay with it. There wasn't anybody that was trying to get the health police in there and make it into a front page story. The locals really said, you know what, this year my kid might have to use an outhouse in sub-zero temperature, but at the end of the day, we're going to have a nice, gorgeous facility. Do you know what I mean? It just seemed like that was so refreshing that the community really embraced the change and the momentum and saw the bigger picture. Is that still the case going on there, especially with the education side of things?
Definitely. What we have here in McKenzie County is so unique, I think, throughout the entire state of North Dakota. And like you said, we're certainly not complainers. So we understand that there are growing pains when you go through something like we have with Bob. But I think this community is they're able to adapt really well. And you're right, they keep their eye on the big picture. They see where this is going. I mean, so we just recently approved bonding for another elementary school. It's going to be a tremendous facility, and we approved, if necessary, to go and get bonding for a third elementary school in the future, if that's going to be necessary, which our projections show that it very likely will be. And I mean, aside from that, we've done some pretty creative things as far as even further education beyond primary school and goes. So one of the things that we've launched through the JDA is the Skills Initiative program. And the Skills Initiative program is it's pretty unique. It's creative, but what it's done is it's brought University of Mary, Williston State College, Train ND, small business development, all under the roof in the Rough Rider Center. And now we're able to offer college classes, we're able to offer certification classes, safety training, whatever it is. We've brought all of that into the Rough Rider Center as a way that we want people to be able to be educated here, even beyond high school. And so I think there are some really tremendous opportunities going on in McKenzie County right now as far as education goes.
How about the oil industry itself? There's companies that have, sounds like at least starting some offices around there, some service companies that have kind of moved in a little bit. But, Watford City really, when you probably look at a 20-year snapshot, is going to be the town that is going to forever be studied by social engineers, by civic engineers, by just the amount of growth that happened from the sewer to the new pizza joint. Do you know what I mean? It is. It's amazing from every aspect you look at it, even from the civic side of things. What we, kind of circling back to what we originally are talking about here, which is these incentive programs that you guys are now doing for housing, to talk about. This is another one of those changes that's going to be studied for a long time. I used to say for the beginning of our programs from back in 2012 that right now the Bakken is going to be read about in our grandkids' history books.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going on right now, and it's exciting to be a part. And from my standpoint, not only is it exciting to be a part of it, but to actually be allowed to have some documentation through the process, to maybe even get something picked up and put in those history books to make a dent in history. Do you guys ever look at it like that you guys are part of this historic process?
I say that all the time. I say that what we're going through in McKenzie County right now, it feels like the California gold rush. I mean, it's such a unique situation that we have with the number of people that have come here, and how the community of Watford City, the community in McKenzie County, has had to adapt to that. How we've had to grow, make changes as far as infrastructure goes, make changes as far as quality of life goes, and now with this housing program. I mean, what we're really trying to address here is that this industry needs to be fed workforce. If we want to continue to grow, we need to provide people that are able to work in the oil field. And back in 2008, when things really started to kick off in North Dakota, the rest of the country was in a very depressed state. I mean, unemployment was high at that point in time. There was a lot of economic uncertainty throughout the country, but the Bakken was booming. So you could come up here in your pickup and get a job, and that was it. Today, we don't have quite that same opportunity because we have low unemployment throughout the entire country. And so what we're trying to do now is find a way to use our competitive advantage, which is the growth production tax that gets kicked back to McKenzie County from the state, to leverage that to keep supplying workforce and keep growing the base of what we have here in McKenzie County. So it's interesting. The two issues that we've heard facing the oil industry in North Dakota right now. First off is flaring regulations, and second is lack of workforce. And so this is something not just hindering development in McKenzie County, but throughout the entire Bakken. And I think what we're trying to do to address that is pretty unique, fairly aggressive, fairly creative. We're excited to see how it's going to work out.
One of the things that we've gotten political on in this program, and we're a non-political program, by getting political is we're just raising the question of more of a pontification, if you will. And so I'm going to throw this your way because you brought up the word flaring. And I know in North Dakota, I think it's 12, 13 months in a row now that we've missed the date, or we've missed the target that we've wanted to get. Down in the Permian, they're actually paying people to come take the gas away because there's so much that's getting flared out. We're trying to have the conversation. What would a world look like if we took, say, 50% or whatever, 100% of the subsidies that wind and solar are getting, and we shifted that towards natural gas? And the reason I say that is because this is a solvable problem. And the energy industry is taxed pretty good. I mean, I think in North Dakota, we've got 11.5% or something like that, and it's one of the higher ones in the nation.
10% right now, and it is, yes, you're right. It's one of the higher ones in the nation.
So they get taxed pretty well. Then there's a lot of fees and a lot of regulations and a lot of that type of things that they have to follow, so that adds up the costs. And then there's that new norm that they got to go through, so they got the added legal costs for every time they want to do something. And then they always make sure that the church has got a bake sale. They always make sure that the kids have got Little League uniforms. So at the end of the day, the energy companies don't have a lot of money for R&D right now. They just don't. And I wondered what a world would look like if we shifted some of those subsidies over. So, the crazy guy up in Canada that's mining Bitcoins off natural gas, what if he got a little bump, and the guys that are living on the well sites checking monitors and trying to make sure methane is at a certain level so turns into liquid at an efficient rate, if they got a little bump, that sort of thing. I think that we'd have greenhouses growing blueberries in no time, but that's just my opinion.
I like where your mind is going. I mean, anything that we could do to lift some of the burden off of the oil industry, you're right. There is probably not an industry with a higher bar to entry than getting into oil and gas, based on the regulation, based on the taxes. And it bears the burden of all that. And then the oil industry has been incredibly generous to McKenzie County. There are some really great people representing large oil companies out here that are plugged into the community, and then they're able to use their position in their company to make sure that, yeah, we've got funding for great things in this community. I mean, and so I think if there were a way to lift some of the burden off the oil industry, that would be great. And I think you bring up an interesting point in trying to address this very specific issue of what are we going to do with this natural gas? Because what we're doing right now, I mean, it's an issue not only of capital investment, but human investment, because putting in pipelines is a very labor-intensive job. And we lack workforce right now, back to our original issue. So beyond even being able to just throw enough money into solving that problem, it's being able to throw the right number of people to address it as quickly as we need to. And so it's a complex issue.
And the part that I really like in this whole thing too is, I mean, and the part that's hard is to say this is not a political thing here, because what we're doing is we're pontificating. But the other part of it is, wind and solar put the benchmarks out themselves, and they've had 40 years of subsidies, 20 ramped up, and they have not hit their benchmarks. And so to me, just having the conversation should not be political. This should be actually a serious conversation, because again, we can solve the flaring issue. And second, and this is where I'm really curious about your opinion, because of course, Joel Brown is with us primarily for the Job Development Authority with McKenzie County. We're talking about that, but he owns mineraltracker.com. And since we're talking now about this, I believe in North Dakota, when something's flared, the mineral owners do not get the royalties. And what would happen with this, with my idea, all of a sudden now these mineral owners would get the royalties, and the local cafes and the local hardware stores are going to see a nice little economic stimulus. Do you know what I mean by that? The mineral owners would also benefit, as well as these science R&D projects and the energy company. It's almost like a win-win-win-win.
Mm-hmm. If there were, certainly, and it's a complex issue. I mean, you bring up the royalty stance on this right now, and you had even mentioned earlier in the program that down in the Permian, they are paying people to take away their gas. They're not only not getting paid for the gas, but they're paying people to take away gas. And that is actually happening up here in North Dakota right now. There are pipelines being built, there are gas plants being built, and there are gathering systems that are being built to well sites where it's not an economic project in order to build that gathering system, but in an attempt to meet flaring regulations, they're doing it. And there are mineral owners out there today that they're getting paid for the royalty on that gas, but the deductions that are necessary to transport that gas and market it exceed the royalties that they're getting paid. And so it shows up as a negative balance on their check at the end of the month. And so it's not only an issue of trying to find a way to address this issue, but it needs to be addressed in a way that's economic if it's going to have any benefit to mineral owners.
And it just seems that idea I'm throwing out there has more validity the more and more people I talk to in the industry. It just seems like it's going to be so much more helpful to so many more people than where those current dollars are being directed.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's resource management. It's being a responsible steward of the resources that we have here in North Dakota, because when that gas is flared, we're not going to get it back. The fact of the matter is, the cold hard truth is that right now gas is not an overly economic product to be producing because we've got so much gas in the U.S. at this point in time. The market is it's overwhelmed with natural gas. So that's driven prices down to a point where it's hard to make an economic project. And what we need are creative minds. We need R&D money going into figuring out what we're going to do with natural gas in order to address this issue. Because right now, building pipelines to every single well site in North Dakota, it's not going to be economic. It's not going to be economic for every one of those sites.
Well, I still think it's not a bad idea for wind and solar to maybe take a step back and say, you know what, after 40 years, we made some big promises that we were going to be economical to the average consumer. And I will gladly argue with a thesis and a board of college-educated people that farmers were more efficient with wind energy 150 years ago with windmills than they are today. And that
I'd love to see that paper.
In fact, You just heard it right there. Until they can show me that they can be more efficient than pulling water out with wind energy versus what they're trying to do right now, forget about it. I mean, once you take a look at how the wind energy destroys a forest and what it does to the animals, it's right there. You're done. And then solar. Honestly, solar is pretty good at charging your cell phone and maybe having some camping things that, are beneficial. But they don't even have solar panels for houses yet that are economical. That's 40 years. That's a long time. And that's why I'm saying I'm not trying to be political here. This is more of, okay, people, we need to do a gut check and an audit here because this flaring thing can solve so many problems. It can give local economies a boost. You might invent some new super plastic that you can put a backyard pool in your a pool in your backyard for $1,000. Or you might come up with some new solar casing that is going to revolutionize the solar industry in 2 years. Once they figure out solar and wind, they still got to figure things out because in Germany they just powered up the coal plants again. So it ain't working.
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine what would happen in America if over the course of 10 years, your electric bill quadrupled in price and then you had to go back to coal anyways?
Well, you think about an easy comparison. Think about when oil went to, close to $150 per barrel, and we were experiencing gas prices that were above $4 a gallon. And that largely helped lead us into an economic crisis in the late 2000s. I mean, so yeah, increased energy costs is like a tax on everybody because there's no way that we aren't going to do without energy in this country. We're not going to stop driving to work because we need to get to work, and we're not going to stop having food delivered to our local grocery store because we need it. And we're not going to stop turning our lights on in our house because we need it. I mean, these are all basic quality of life things that we've gotten used to, and there's no opportunity for us to cut back on those once energy prices increase. So it'd be tremendous.
I just spoke at the Energy Expo last week in Gillette, Wyoming, and that was one of my messages was, when I grew up, energy wasn't political, and it should not be now. Listen, the energy companies love all of the above policy, and that's what it should be. Every energy has a purpose. Like I said, in wind energy, they're still, bringing water up on the farm. It works really good, and maybe some small scale, projects, that type of thing. In fact, in India, they figured out a great way. They have corkscrew wind turbines on the interstates, so when the buses drive by, it actually powers it. And so, they've got it. Works on a small scale level. And I know some garbage dumps, they've got little small wind turbines that power a building. So it works. Great. You found a use for it. But on the big scale, we're not there yet. Same thing with solar. Okay. Same thing with oil and gas. Maybe there's more efficient ways to use it that we haven't thought of yet. And the energy industry just is all about, we'll let the market decide. And that's what I really like about with the energy industry is let the market decide, because at the end of the day, energy shouldn't be political. I don't know. Maybe you disagree with me and think it should be, but
No, I agree 100%. I think the view on energy, and in particular oil, gas, it's so negative. I mean, it's incredible to me. And so when it becomes a politicized issue, it really takes it away from the true issue, which is we all require energy for quality of life, and we require affordable energy for the quality of life that we've established in this country. And I don't think people realize that by demonizing oil and gas, by demonizing big oil, I mean, what they're really talking about is doing away with what it is that has built up the quality of life that they're not willing to give up. And that's why they continue to remain, even as much as they might kick and scream about oil and gas, they continue to go and fill up their cars at the local gas station because they're not willing to give up their quality of life, and nor should they be. But to go and demonize oil and gas the way that they have, I think it's just it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But that is kind of the political climate that we're in right now.
Yeah, it really is, and that's too bad. And so another one of my messages at the Energy Expo is, on our programs, I don't know how much time you have here. We're going way outside the box of the Job Development Authority was. But this is what led to where we're at today was, we've had John Gibson and Harold Hamm and James Volker and, 5 other big names I can drop, big oil and gas names I can drop. But the reason I don't mean to name drop, I mean to bring it up because these guys, they live in, they work, they're the owners of the company. And they all said the word paradigm shift. And so part of my message at this expo was, okay, take a look at, your drilling, and that has gone through a paradigm shift. We've got horizontal flushing that have happened, and we've got, rig mats that have come into play, and the rig is completely different. They walk now, they walk. So it's a paradigm shift, okay? And then I go, take a look at your human resources department. Do you think big data has changed your human? And of course, everybody in the crowd is nodding their head because technology completely changed the way human resources is operated. And then I go, how about your public relations? We need to take a paradigm shift there too. And I think what we need to do is we need to take control of the narrative once again. And we need to stop lecturing people, and we need to just start letting them know that energy is part of your life. It is an all of the above process. We need to learn how to coexist with it instead of, I kind of felt like for a while, the energy industry, and I got caught up in this a little bit too, almost like we were lecturing them. And that's not a good thing for, let's be honest, oil and gas is one of the kings of the economy. And when you're the big bad wolf and you're the big dog on the block, sometimes you can be wrongfully accused. And so we just kind of had to take a step back a little bit and say, okay, how are we going to rethink our public relations? Because I think the environmentalists have gotten very lazy, complacent, and actually out of touch. And so there's a legitimate chance for oil and gas to say, you know what? We are part of your life, and it's very good. Like for me, I ordered a vertical garden. 90% of it's made out of plastic. And I'm going to garden 30 plants in my living room, 30 plants, and it's going to use 90% less water. And that could not happen without oil and gas. All the way from making it to delivering it to my house to pushing a button once a month and having, my own lettuce. I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah, it's awesome.
So
that's great.
That's the type of stuff that we're doing on the Crude Life. Instead of having somebody like that who normally would probably, protest against our industry, we're bringing them on to help promote that product because you know what? 90% of it's oil and gas. It's a petroleum product at the end of the day. But it's allowing me to have, a cleaner, healthier life and that sort of thing. So that was a big message at the conference too. Younger people like us, because, good-looking guys like us, as young as we are. But, we're kind of socially engineered to think one thing. And then until you get into the industry, you start to realize how valuable the opportunity is. I don't know. Sorry, I get on my soapbox at times because I really do enjoy this industry a lot and the opportunity it gives. So, how's your business doing, Mineral Tracker?
It's doing great. Mineral Tracker it continues to build and build. We're adding users every single day. I mean, and really what's exciting about that is that with every user that we add to Mineral Tracker, we're really opening the eyes of this broader group of mineral owners in North Dakota who have kind of been rushed into this entire industry, almost unbeknownst to them that they had all this oil and gas under their feet. And all of a sudden, a very important part of their income, an important part of their life, they have almost no insight into how they are actually making the money that they are. And so with Mineral Tracker, I mean, it's incredibly simple to use. We launched a freemium version is what we're calling it, the basic subscription, so that if you're a mineral owner and you're only maybe collecting, $50, $100 a month off of it, you still have the ability to go and see how is that $50 or $100 going to change over time? Am I still getting paid correctly on that? Where are my wells? So there's no cost bar to entry now to get into Mineral Tracker, and that's been a really big shift for us. So we keep adding people every day. We're very active on continuing to develop the app and add more features. We're currently working on getting it into the App Store on Apple or Android so that people have easier access to it on their phone. So yeah, Mineral Tracker keeps humming along. We're adding staff. We're growing pretty quick. So it's been an exciting time.
So circling back to this all over the board interview we've had today, Job, Job Development Authority, McKenzie County. Well, when you live and breathe and you're part of the community and you go to church and you go to ball games and all those different things, it's just, it's tough when you, I saw the progression happen in Colorado 5 years ago. People started looking over their shoulders when they said they worked in the oil and gas industry. And it just really broke my heart, to be honest. It did, people were starting to feel ashamed about working in the industry because they were getting trolled and shamed. At the end of the day, that's what it was. They were shamed, publicly stoned. I didn't mean that from Colorado. Sorry. I meant it from the biblical standpoint, not the liberal standpoint anyway. But
yeah, it was appropriate for Colorado, though.
It really was. Sometimes, my writer mind takes over. So getting back to, kind of what we're talking about, you mentioned the housing opportunities for people who are looking to build. Is it primarily for single family homes in Watford City? Is that kind of this incentive program you guys have?
That's exactly what it is. What we noticed early on was that we have a lot of apartments in McKenzie County right now. I don't know what percentage of our population lives in apartments, but it is a very high percentage, surprisingly high. Our apartment occupation right now is approaching 99%. And so we've got young families who would love to have, they've got income, they've got the ability to go and buy their first house. But there aren't houses on the market. There just isn't been a lot of construction up here. And so what we're trying to do is really jumpstart where we see this gap from a young family who's moved to McKenzie County, who wants to be here long term, but they don't have the opportunity to move from a apartment to their first house. And we see that as incredibly important for them to be able to put down roots here in McKenzie County. And so we wanted to find a way to incentivize filling that gap. And so that's why this is aimed completely at single family housing and really in that price range that is going to be the first house that someone buys coming out of an apartment. So we're looking at what the program is actually doing is it taking houses that can be built. They can be built along with all the infrastructure necessary for approximately $365,000 is kind of what we're seeing as the market right now. And the program brings that, it intervenes and brings that purchase price down from $365,000 down to the $315,000 FHA loan limit. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to really jumpstart development of more housing within that realm. And if we're looking at probably impacting 20 to 30 homes this year. And what we're doing right now is really a pilot program. We see that if this is going to be a successful program, we're likely going to continue to expand it, continue to get more funding for it in the future. But it's exciting. It's what we're trying to accomplish here. There aren't many other counties that have the resources that we do here in McKenzie County. But we see this as the number one need that we need to address right now if we want to continue to develop McKenzie County economically and if we want to keep adding workforce to this industry.